everyone. I'm joined here with Winston Wu. Winston, it's nice having you on the show. So what we're going to be focusing on most of the show is on American culture and how it kind of comparing American culture to other cultures throughout the world and a lot of the problems in American culture. I guess you can start off by telling us about yourself. Your parents were immigrants from Taiwan, and you grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Could you please tell us about your story growing up and about your kind of a brief biography?
Okay, yeah. Well, I was born in Taiwan, and then I came to the States when I was 3, and I mostly grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. But I'd say ever since I was in elementary school, I mean, I've never had a very, very authentic life. I mean, I was bullied and teased, and I thought the world was an evil place, and I didn't know how to make sense out of that. So then I turned to religion and stuff, and later, I mean, eventually I realized that we have a very inauthentic culture and a high rate of mental illness, and there's just so much social dysfunction, with the high divorce rate, with the breakdown of family values, so I've discovered, that it's mostly the culture that's the problem, not the people that are suffering. I mean, there's a lot of factors, but the society is just dysfunctional. I mean, we have the highest mental illness rate in the world, and that really speaks volumes. And if you go to other countries or if you travel a lot, you find out that people don't have to see a therapist or a psychologist when they have problems. They have people to talk to, basically the key thing in America is you aren't really. I mean, you feel insecure by default, and you aren't really allowed to be yourself. So you're constantly running on this treadmill of trying to keep up this pseudo confidence, this bravado, which isn't even authentic. And so I mean, no one really feels accepted for who they are. That's why people wear such a fake mask, and they act very superficial. So everyone, even good-looking people, are insecure deep down inside, and there's also a narcissism epidemic where everyone, I mean, not everyone, but a high percentage of people are narcissistic, and they think they deserve the best, and they take every little insult. I mean, not insult, but they take every little thing personally, and they can twist a compliment into an insult. So people have very fragile, insecure egos, and you just don't find this in a lot of the rest of the world, where things are. I mean, every country has problems and corruption and good and bad things, but they have the same problems that people have had for thousands of years. Whereas in America, the social dysfunction and the breakdown of family values and the inauthentic lifestyle is a fairly recent phenomenon. It's not natural at all. So yeah, I mean, there's just something inauthentic, and also a very key telling thing is that if you're a very down to earth and sincere person in America, I mean, you actually don't fit in with a lot of cliques and groups, and you're kind of, the more authentic and down to earth you are, the more of a misfit you are, and I think that speaks volumes about the inauthentic nature of the culture and society that it's become.
That's the thing about American culture. I mean, you wrote an extensive article about your experience in high school. I think a lot of people have really miserable experiences in high school, but in high school you see the most extreme of that culture where it's very cliquish, and if you don't fit into one of those cliques, you're kind of on your own. But I think that's true of American culture. I think it's worse in places like California and New York. Maybe better. I don't know if there's a difference in places like the Midwest, but it's definitely worse. I think it's worse in places like California and New York. But it's something that's it's the culture of this whole country. I mean, I've spent several months in England, and even there, I think people were more open. A good example is I noticed there were a lot of instances where I was maybe like 16 when I was there with my family, but you would just start up a conversation with a stranger if you went on a hike or went to a restaurant, and I live in LA. That's very rare in LA where you would have a conversation with a stranger, and people are very. I mean, I think places like LA are the worst, but I think this is something that part of American culture as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is the worst on the West Coast and also in New York. But I think, I mean, from what a lot of people say, it's actually the worst on the West Coast USA. Because if you go inland, even if you just go to Nevada, you start to notice that people are more down to earth. And you know, and the more inland you go, the more people are more down to earth. I mean, that comparatively speaking, you know, to the West Coast, of course. I mean, plus people who live in a rural nature environment are going to be more down to earth anyways, you know. But a lot of the attention in Western culture comes from California and New York. So the rest of the world sees us, you know, sees the U.S. as being California, you know, because, you know, the Hollywood and the media culture comes from there.
So much of it is about just people. A lot of people end up being miserable. They devote so much of their lives to trying to see who has a better car, and a lot of the times these people end up being miserable. They don't really enjoy life. Everything's about status and showing off materialism.
Yeah, and I read an article recently that someone sent that said that, I mean, America is, I mean, people are you know, have good, they still have basic morals and a conscience, but they're kind of soulless in that, you know, they've been completely enslaved to their work and their job, and there's just not a lot of meaningful interaction between people, and people don't even know their neighbors. I mean they just smile politely to get along, but there's not there's a huge lack of human connection, and the thing is, you're not allowed to talk about this, because if you go out and talk about it, you know, out in public in America, or you know, whether it's at a party or a work environment, I mean, people think you're a freak, you know, or a loser to talk about this, because people always keep this facade and bravado and mask that everything is going great and everything is wonderful and every day is a great day, and that they're always happy even when they're not. There's this pressure to constantly maintain this illusion that everything is great even when it's not. So it's a very inauthentic culture in a lot of ways, and I think that leads to a psychosis where people have a split from reality and themselves, and I think subconsciously everyone knows this deep down, you know, but some people just don't realize it, and some people can't put it into words. And I get a lot of fan letters, you know, from people that visit my website, happierabroad.com. Fan letters that say, you know, I didn't know anyone else thought this way. I thought it was just me, and I thought, you know, I was the problem. Because our culture tells you to blame yourself and not the culture, and you know, but people that are more aware and realize, you know, things like I would encourage people to Google these names, like Eric Fromm, for example, a Swiss psychologist. He actually said that most people are insane, and insane people get along with other insane people, whereas the authentic person usually becomes a misfit. So that's Eric Fromm said that, and also a few hundred years ago there was a great German philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer, who was also very insightful and said a lot of true things. I mean, even though he was a pessimist, you know, I mean, most of what he said was very true. You know, that society tends to be inauthentic in that you know, when you're trying to appeal to a large group of people, you know, you kind of have to say what they want to hear and to be inauthentic, and that problem has reached, you know, the height. It's you know, an all-time high in America. So it's definitely the society and the culture, not the individual, and authentic people tend to have a hard time fitting in.
Yeah, and everything's kind of becoming kind of fake about our society. I mean, if you look at the food is all artificial, and if you go into a lot of the newer cities or suburbs, everything is really kind of fake and ugly. And there's just so many different aspects of our society. I mean, from the way people interact with each other, to the aesthetics, to the food that we're eating.
Yeah, for some reason, I don't know what they put in the food, but it, I mean, we all know there's this obesity problem in America, and I don't think it's just a lack of exercise. I mean, there's got to be something in the food. I don't know what, but some, there's some kind of chemical that because a lot of people notice that like a lot of immigrants notice that when they come to America, for some reason the food makes you fat or throws your body out of proportion, and it also makes you more angry. It flares your temper for some reason. I don't know why, but I mean, we don't know a lot of things that go on, like at the higher levels of government and the higher corporations and what the elite do. I mean, it could be a conspiracy. It's in our food, or a Monsanto's or whatever. I mean, there could be a conspiracy. I mean, we just don't know because the American public is not told a lot of things that goes on, and when you're not told,
and something like organic food should be accessible to everyone, but it's considered like a luxury item, like that. Like rich people who go to Whole Foods can get organic food, but it's not really accessible to your average person. I mean, a lot of working class people eat it at like McDonald's, for instance, because that's all they can afford. Good quality food is like almost like a luxury item.
Yeah, and it's expensive. I mean, you have to be well off to be eating organic food from health stores every day. But that's one of the things. When I was in Europe, I was told that most of the food there is natural and organic. There's no need for an organic health food store in Europe because they don't put the kind of chemicals that they do in America. And so if you go to Europe, for instance, you'll see that most people, they don't have that obesity problem there. Most people are really thin, and height weight proportionate, and it's only when America exports McDonald's and fast food over there that people start becoming more overweight. But overall, I mean, they're a lot more thin and normal. And it's got to be something in the food. As they say, you are what you eat. So.
But with the globalization, that's all spreading to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, the Western culture, exports, its culture to the rest of the world, and like McDonald's and the culture, and so I mean, yeah, I mean, some countries are becoming a little more like that, but it's if you travel internationally, you'll see that most countries are still not like that. I mean, even in Europe, I mean, you can have some good things in Western culture without the bad things. And like you said, people in England, seem more open and down to earth, and you'll notice that in pretty much all of Europe, that people just have are just more authentic. They don't give this fake smile. If you see someone smile at you, it's usually a real smile. I mean, it's usually an authentic smile, not a fake one.
You also talk about European culture and Asian culture. I guess we can start talking about Asian culture. You talk about their positive and negative characteristics, but I know some people have said that you kind of, when you were growing up, you did feel a little bit out of place with Asian American culture. You talked about how it's kind of has a strong emphasis on conformity. And you talked about like you talked about when you were in high school, you got bad grades, and that was that's sort of like the worst thing that Asian student can do.
Yeah, well, I was always, a free thinker. I didn't believe that. I mean, grades are I mean, a psychological thing. I mean, it's just a letter on a piece of paper. If you don't think it's important, then it's not. But the thing is, most people are like sheep, or zombies. Almost everything, if you really think about it, almost everything you believe is because everyone else believes it or because society told you to believe it. Most people just, don't think for themselves. They just believe whatever everyone else does, and they assume that if everyone believes something, then it must be true, or if society says something, then it must be true. So they never, critically think or analyze these things. And grades is an example. I mean, if I get an F, on a test, I can choose to take that personally or not. If I don't think it's important, then it's not for me. It's just a letter on a piece of paper. So you have that choice to not let it affect you. But most people don't realize that because they care about what other people think, And I found that in order to be truly free, to have true freedom, it begins in the mind. And the first thing you got to do is not care what other people think. Just be true to yourself, be true to your heart, be true to your life purpose, and your passion. And once you don't care about what other people think, you're actually a lot more free than you were before, because other people can't affect you, or and you don't have to live to please other people, or to please your society or your peers, or to keep up an image to compete with other people, because you just don't care. You're just doing what's best for you, and evaluating yourself by your own standards, and that's the ultimate freedom that one can have. And yeah, you're right. I didn't fit into the Asian American culture because they were all about grades and trying to get into the highest universities, and so I was kind of a misfit in both cultures, the American culture and the Asian culture. And but I always saw myself as very sincere and authentic and down to earth. But that isn't enough, because, like I said, you can be very sincere and you can be very friendly and outgoing, but if you don't break into any cliques, then you don't have any friends. So that's really sad and telling that
when
you can be the most.
You were in high school. You did visit Taiwan. Was there that culture of cliques there, or that's more of an American thing?
Yeah, Taiwan actually has cliques too, just like in America, and people don't. It's similar to America in that people don't socialize outside of their cliques, and that's true of Japan and Korea too, the first world Asian countries. But the thing is, if you don't belong to a clique, you're not, you're not really persecuted there. And if you have people that you're seeing every day at school and work, it's a lot easier to make friends too. And you just don't feel like you have to keep up a bravado of confidence or something, or keep up an image. It's still not as people are more introverted there and reserved, but it's not as fake or artificial. So yeah, it is cliquish, but for in a different way, for different reasons. So.
Well, you also, I think, is it more like in America, if you look at high school, popularity is not necessarily based on who is the best student. That's kind of I think in Asian culture, there's more of an emphasis on education, but in I'd say in American culture, popularity was based on extroversion.
Yeah, well, I think that's actually a myth, because, like I said, you can be very outgoing and not have any friends if you don't break into any cliques. You kind of have to play the game and play the superficial games that it takes to break into cliques. And some people are good at that because they're natural conformists. But I've never, I've always been kind of a contrarian. I don't go with the crowd. I think for myself. So I've never been really good at breaking into cliques. And you kind of have to be somewhat of a conformist to break into a clique, and that's the problem with me. And I've actually always vibed more with the European culture than with the Asian or the American culture, because Europeans are kind of more. They kind of have an intellectual life where they think for themselves. So, for example, you could go to Italy or Greece or France, and you could find these really intellectual guys that also know how to have fun. They're not nerds or geeks or anything. They know how to have fun. They're very charming to women, and they're very handsome, but they're very artistic and intellectual at the same time. Whereas in America, if you're like that, you're kind of a nerd or a misfit, and so I've always vibed with that because my mentality was more. See, in Europe, people judge their life by the variety of experiences they've had. They don't judge their life by their money or their career. They don't see what they do for a living
in
as
some
their
parts of
identity.
Europe, it's actually considered rude to ask someone what they do for a living, or to talk about how much money someone makes. It's considered rude in a lot of Europe.
Yeah, it is, and people aren't obsessed with their career. Their identity is based on who they are, their soul, their experiences, their variety. When they look at their life, they think, how much variety, what kind of experiences have I had? How much variety do I have in my experiences and my travels? That's why you see so many Europeans traveling, like as backpackers or something, whereas, there's a lesser percentage of Americans. I think only like 8% of Americans have passports last time I heard. It might have grown since then, but Americans don't travel internationally as much as Europeans do. And so yeah, they they judge their life by the experiences they had, whereas Americans judge it by material things and their career and their keeping up with their Joneses, and I don't think that's an authentic way to live. It's just so unnatural to me. I've never been able to fit into that, even when I've tried. I mean, it just was not me, and I don't think humans were meant to be that way. It's just not natural to judge yourself, by material things, because those things are illusions anyways. I mean, what makes people happy is and this is a key point that the media will never tell you, is that the happiest people in the world are not people who have too little or too much, but people who have just enough. Those are the people that are most balanced and the most happy, and who have the most meaningful, interaction,
Well, the media is kind of based on consumerism. Like, if you look at how Hollywood and the big corporations, they're making a massive profit off of consumerism, so they want to keep that going, and the whole commercialized culture of consumerism.
Yeah, the media is all about boosting the economy. I mean, one thing I don't like about the U.S. mainstream media is when people are starting to buy less useless junk, for example, they actually report that as bad news, as though, people should go out and buy useless junk that they don't need to try to, and waste their money and fill their house with useless junk.
Yeah, it's a waste of money. I mean, aesthetically, in Europe, people value quality over quantity, and it's also bad for the environment. But it's like what George Bush said, that right after 9/11, to do your patriotic duty and go out and shop.
Yeah, and that's just insane. I mean, they're obviously controlled by the corporate interests, where they, everything is about working and consuming rather than quality of life. I mean, there's a saying in Europe: Europeans work to live, whereas Americans live to work. And there's another saying by someone that I quoted in my ebook, where he says, America is a country that's built for doing business, not living life. So it's hard to have a quality, rich life in America because, if your whole life is spent working, if you think about it, it's an oxymoron. What's the point of working to make a living if almost all of your living or your life consists of working? It defeats the purpose. But Americans are so brainwashed that they don't stop and think about these things. Everyone just lives. People just live to make money, and I think that the brainwashing and the mind control is actually stronger in America than it is in other countries, because Americans see themselves as individuals, with their own outspoken ideas and thoughts. And in an individualist country, in order to control people, you have to use stronger mind control techniques. Whereas in Asia, they don't need to turn up the mind control, because even though every government uses some form of mind control, in Asia they don't need that much mind control because people are naturally conformed, so they don't need to brainwash people as much, as in America, where they have to use stronger techniques than in a country where everyone thinks they're an individual. So that's something I've noticed.
What do you think the origins of it are? I guess there's different ways to look at it. I know that some people come up with the so-called conspiracy theories to explain stuff, and then some people say it's just a trend that kind of evolved on its own. But how do you see the origins of this? Some of these trends have been going on for a while, and some of them are fairly recent, but it does seem to be getting worse and worse, almost like a cancer that's spreading.
Yeah, well, I think it's both. There's the economic factor, and also, there's an agenda for social engineering, and we don't really know what that agenda is. But I don't think everything. For the elite class, they can't. I don't think everything is about money, because they have all the money in the world, and they can print money out of thin air. So, I don't think they're concerned with making more money. They obviously have some hidden agenda that we don't know. It might be like a lot of conspiracy people say, or like Alex Jones says, or David Icke says, a new world order or a global government. It might be that, but there definitely is a lot of social engineering, because if you look at American society, I mean, people are segregated more than they are in other countries, because it's like they say, it's the divide and conquer strategy. You have to divide people into little bubbles to make them weak, so that they're not a threat to the elite.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the biggest threat to the elite is people kind of working together, and obviously, and they just want to divide people into different kind of different, as you said, different bubbles to exactly divide and conquer.
Yeah, and they prey on fear. I mean, you see, in every country, the only way a few people can control, the many, a lot of people, is by convincing people to give up their power. See, if you don't give away your power, then no one can really control you. I mean, control itself is an illusion, but as long as you don't organize a movement, the government really doesn't care what you do. I mean, most of the time, even if you, even if you break a few laws, they're not really gonna worry about it. If you're just an individual, it's when you organize a movement and draw attention to it that they start to care. Otherwise, they don't really care what you do. So, I mean, you have to take.
None of the political movements are really. I think in this country we have the liberals and the conservatives, and I think they're both. The thing I would say about conservatives are always quick to defend the sort of making a profit. They're all about making a profit, and that's kind of what they're about. But the thing, liberals are just I think so many of them are just so politically correct. You can't have a discussion with them without them freaking out about political correctness. So they're both. I think they're both kind of useless in those two regards.
Yeah, I mean that's very ironic. I mean it's actually very hypocritical because America has been taken over by political correctness, especially on the West Coast and in New York. And if you have a country with free speech, how can you have free speech but demand that everybody be politically correct, and not say what's on their mind or not speak the truth? I mean, there's so much hypocrisy in America that it just doesn't make any sense. To have such contradictory laws and expectations. Yeah, truth is often a taboo now, and I'm actually more of a libertarian, than a conservative or a liberal. But I've noticed that conservatives, even though they can be more narrow-minded, they're at least they're usually more down to earth than liberals are. And I've had a lot of conservative friends who will, even though I disagree with them, they still keep me as friends. Whereas when I have liberal friends, if I don't agree with their views, they usually break off the friendship. They're a lot more insecure.
Yeah, that's true. I agree completely. I disagree with conservatives. But for the most part, conservatives aren't as bad as liberals when it comes to you have to be really careful what you say around them, or they'll get offended. If you say the wrong thing, they get upset, or
they're a lot more insecure. Yeah. So it's like it's what's really ironic is these liberals think they're progressive or something, but how can you be progressive if I can't even be honest around them? If it's almost like they're Nazis against free speech. If you think about it, it's the liberals that want all the political correctness. They're less authentic and so insecure but yeah, if you have liberal friends, you'll find that once you don't agree with them, they'll get offended and they'll cut off the friendship with you. They just don't like you if you don't agree with them, and they're actually a lot more hateful than the conservatives are. It's like they have an axe to grind or something. If you've noticed, they're less mentally balanced. I'm not either for or against either side, but those are just observations that I've noticed.
Hey, hold on a second, please. It's time for a break. Please stay with us.
Yeah, and Yeah, and I mean, there are so many taboos in America that I don't see how I mean, what's the point of the First Amendment or the free speech? I mean, most of these laws, are just on paper. They're not really enforced. I mean, they're not really lived.
One
And
thing I
so
have to say is most people, when they think of, they associate freedom as freedom from government oppression, but in a lot of cases, society and culture can be almost equally oppressive as a government could be.
yeah, the whole freedom thing doesn't make sense because I could talk a lot about this because I've written a lot of articles on this, but I mean, most countries are not, fascist, I mean, there's this myth in America that it's the freest country in the world, but there's really nothing to support that because in most countries, I mean, in pretty much any country, as long as you obey the laws, the government doesn't care what you do. So as long as as long as you pay your bills and obey the laws, that you're pretty much free to do whatever you want, and that's true anywhere. So in America and in other countries. I mean, you can do the same thing in Australia or Europe too. I mean, so there's no evidence for this myth, that America is the freest country in the world, or because when people talk about freedom in America, they act like they sort of insinuate that other countries don't have the freedoms that we have, and there's
It's
nothing
absurd.
to support that.
We have in sheer numbers and percentage, we have the most people in prisons in the entire world. I mean, that's not a free country.
Yeah, and also if you think about it, I mean, if you look at it, America actually has more laws than other countries do, and they enforce them too more tightly than other countries do. So if you have more laws and more regulations, then obviously you have less freedom, as a business and as a person than you do in other countries. So in that sense, America actually has less freedoms than other countries. I mean, there is like political and religious freedom, yeah, in some ways, but to me, freedom is waking up and doing what you want every day. And most people, go to a job that they don't like every day, and so they're completely controlled and enslaved by their job and by the economic system. So in that sense, there's no true freedom, unless you're self-employed or you have more free time, or you're
The
able
other
to.
thing with political correctness is, I mean, a lot of people, if they're outspoken about something that's politically incorrect, they have to worry about losing their job. I mean, a lot of these big corporations will fire people for having politically incorrect views.
Oh, definitely. I mean, when you're employed, I mean, you have to watch what you say. You can't even say what you want. So I mean, there's not even any free speech, So a lot of things you believe in are myths, and I would even say the whole democracy thing is a myth too, because a democracy technically means a rule by the majority. But what country on earth, is ruled by the majority? Definitely not the U.S. I mean, the people of the United States have no control over policy. I mean, if there was a majority rule in the U.S., then there would be no wars, there would be no taxes, and the government would leave everyone alone. But that's not true, So obviously, if the majority of the American people don't control the U.S. or control the U.S. government, then technically it's not a democracy. So that actually is another myth. Technically, it's a total myth. And the founding fathers founded America as a republic, and just like the Roman
they
Empire was
emphasize a republic, not a democracy. But we're not even a democracy. I mean,
we're an oligarchy now. We're an oligarchy now, which is ruled by the elite, or ruled by the rich, or corporatocracy, or ruled by the corporate elite. So there's only two stable forms of government in the world. One is a republic, and one is an oligarchy. A republic is ruled by law, and an oligarchy is ruled by the elite. And those are the only two stable forms of government. And obviously, America has become a rule by the elite. So technically, it's an oligarchy now, not a republic anymore. And it's been for a long time. So, but a democracy, I mean, it never was. So, I don't know who started that myth. I mean, I think the whole voting process is just an illusion to give people a sense of power. And amazingly, people still believe in it, even though it's been discredited. I mean, it's been disproven a long time ago that voting does not change policy. It doesn't affect anything. I mean, the government still does what it wants. I mean, regardless of what you vote for. I mean, the policy doesn't change, but people are still gullible enough to fall for it. and that's really
And
sad.
would you say you felt freer in other parts of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have to. I felt like people were easier to meet, more sociable, more down to earth, and I didn't have to be something that I was not, and I actually meet a lot more people, make a lot more friends, especially when you're traveling. Um, People are just more inclusive. Not in every country, of course, but definitely in some places.
Which countries would you say are more inclusive, and which ones are not so inclusive?
I would say most of Europe except maybe Scandinavia, and especially Eastern Europe is more inclusive, and Russia, Ukraine, Latin America, and I'd say most of Asia is like that too. Except for the first world countries like Japan, Korea, Taiwan. It does seem like the more economically prosperous a country is, the less social people are. I mean, it's a sad truth, but poor people are more compassionate and kind because they're more interdependent with each other. Poor people are more friendly and open with strangers than middle class and above are. They're more cliquish. And that's a universal thing that I've noticed that the more money you have, the less social you are, unless you're a really naturally outgoing guy like me. Like no matter how much money I have, I'm still very open and outgoing because I'm very, I mean, I'm friendly and authentic. It doesn't make me snobby or antisocial. So it depends, But yeah, it's definitely large regions: South America, Africa, Russia, Ukraine, China, most of Europe. I'd say most of the world is very, very authentic and easy to make friends. I mean, it just flows a lot more naturally. And I'd actually say that. I mean, how in American movies everyone looks very friendly and expressive and outgoing and easy to meet. I mean, that's not the way America is in real life, but in Europe it actually is that way, as you see in American movies, a lot more than
I don't get. Well, a lot of people like to talk about how Americans always like to complain Europeans are snooty.
Well, some Europeans are culture snobs, like in France, for instance. They're snobby about their culture, but once you get used to that and you learn how to get on their good side, and I mean, then they start to open up and warm up. I mean, it is true that they're culture snobs, but the thing is, the problem in America is a lot of people, are just isolated, and there's a lot of people that just hate other people in general. They just dislike people. A lot of people can only tolerate other people for only a short period of time. That's one reason why a lot of people prefer to be alone in America, is there's just this hatred of other people. I don't know why, but you won't find that in Europe, where people naturally just hate other people in general. So I mean, a lot of countries do have snobbiness, but it's a different kind of snobbiness. It's more like a nationalism kind of snobbiness.
I think that's a good thing that they want to preserve their culture, and I mean, European culture is a lot more. It is more authentic because it's been around. It's evolved over a very long time, like thousands of years, or hundreds of thousands, or to thousands of years. The thing about American culture is relatively new. And we do have some some areas have strong regional cultures, but a lot of American culture is just kind of this kind of consumerism, and that's kind of what we're spreading. Or we're kind of, as I said, we're spreading that to the rest of the world. So people in, let's say, France, a lot of them do resent that when they see like McDonald's opening up there and their culture. But it is, on the other hand, there is a lot of, from what I've heard, Europe is far from perfect. They do have all these speech laws there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would take everything the media says with a grain of salt, because the media is going to portray everything in the most negative and stressful way possible. That's why I don't even watch the news. I mean, but if you go there as a traveler or as a visitor and spend some time in different parts of Europe, I mean, you definitely experience a more authentic people, and especially for me, because I would say that I am more like them than I am a typical American, because I don't like to, do superficial greetings or act fake or have this, fake optimism, that a lot of Americans do. And plus a lot of Europeans. One thing I've noticed is that young people in Europe can have deep conversations and deep, meaningful conversations, whereas in America, usually the older crowd, like the 40-year-old and above crowd, tends to be more down to earth and into deep conversations, whereas, if you look at teenagers in America or the young crowd, most of them are pretty much airheadish and not into deep conversations. It's like being more dumb is being cool, there's this dumb is cool mentality in America among the young groups, but in Europe, the young people are more down to earth and they speak more languages and they have a more broader knowledge of topics to talk about. The quality of the conversations are just much higher. People are more curious about the rest of the world, so you notice a difference. I've met girls in Europe who are 20 years old and they're very beautiful and they could pass for models and yet they're very down to earth and authentic, and they're not full of themselves, and they're just more authentic, and they have an intellectual life, not just an external life. They like to have fun too, of course, but they're also into learning things and enriching themselves culturally and mentally too.
What is it that Steve Hoka, who he's done some, I think he used to have a radio show, I think on YouTube, he said something that the issue of male loneliness is the most taboo issue in our society. He says even more so than anti-Semitism.
Yeah, it seems to be, because if you look at YouTube, they actually remove videos about male loneliness or the dating problems in America, and that gets talked about less than even anti-Semitism. If you're a racist, it is a taboo subject, but but if you talk about the problems with the dating scene, it just makes you look like a loser.
You think in some ways it is, because it is anything to do with race. Race is definitely, or anti-Semitism, are very extremely taboo topics. But I think you're right. People don't want to talk about that issue because people say, "Oh, you're a loser." So that's what makes it, the social conditioning, even not necessarily the political correctness, makes that a very taboo subject.
Yeah, and plus, the feminism in the U.S. makes it. Almost illegal to say anything bad about the dating scene in the U.S. Or to talk about men's problems, because they want all the focus to be on women and children. It's like that's all that matters. Men are expendable in the U.S. Men don't have the rights that women and children do. So, and that's really sad, because men work the hardest to provide, for everything. And they invent things, they build things, but they're treated, as second-class citizens in America. America is basically has become a matriarchy, for sure. It's almost politically correct to be a man. If you're a single heterosexual male, you're pretty much considered, a dangerous creep unless you prove otherwise. But yeah, and also it's taboo to talk about the dating problems in general in America, because you have to. It makes you look like a loser. Plus, most people are trying to look cool and confident, like a winner. But if you blame society for some loneliness epidemic in America, then you're going the opposite way. You're not trying to prove yourself to be cool in America or improve your image. It actually just damages your image. So it's like a self-harming thing, and so most people don't have the guts to talk about it, but it's true. There's a huge percentage of guys that are lonely. They have no romance, no love in their life, and they have no choices. They can't even get a girl to have coffee with them, because women I mean, the women there are so picky, you know, and they all want the top 10% of the men, and so 90, you know, a large percentage of the men, 80 or 90%, you know, have to settle, and still a large percentage have no choices too. I mean, there's guys that go for years with no dates or girlfriends at all.
And keep in mind, a lot of these guys, they're not necessarily guys you would think are losers. These are just normal men.
Yeah, some of them have good jobs, and some of them are decent looking, you know, and yet they still can't find a date because there's so many. I mean, with the narcissism in America, everyone thinks they deserve someone perfect, you know, with the best. Actually, not so much the men. Men just want a girl who's feminine and down to earth and sincere, you know. But you know, a lot of women want the whole package. They want height, status, looks, money, great personality. They want everything, the whole package of everything, you know, and they're just, and most men don't fit those qualities. So a lot of women in America reject like 99% of men, you know, even of everyone that likes them. So there are just so many lonely men, and they're afraid to talk about it. So what they do is they deny it and focus on their work and their career, you know. So there's a lot of men suffering in silent misery out there, and I get letters and emails from them all the time that they never knew that other people were feeling the same way, and that they didn't know that the problem was them too. They thought that the problem was them because you're taught in American culture that if you have, you know, if you're lonely or any problem you have, you got to blame yourself and improve yourself because you know they insinuate that society is normal and healthy, and that if there's a problem, then it's the individual, not the society, and that's just not true, you know, because I always say, if the problem is me, then how come in other countries I don't have the same problem? You know, that kind of, you know, debunks that myth that the problem is always it must be with me. Because if it was with me, then it would be the same everywhere, and it's not. You know, I notice a huge difference in cultures, and plus it's also taboo to you know, to compare cultures or to compare groups of people. You know, because then you get accused of generalizing. You know, but you see, I'm not really generalizing. I'm just defining very strong patterns that I see. You know. Like, for example, if you see 8 in a field with 10 boxes, if you see 8 X's and 2 O's, then you know, then I see a pattern of X's. You know, I mean, everything. I mean, when you compare and generalize, it is tricky because on the one hand, it's not true that I mean, it's not true that 100% of people are one way or another. You know, you can't overgeneralize. But on the other hand, you can't say that everyone is the same either in the world either, because they're not.
Yeah, it's considered like you're called a racist if you say there's differences between people. Well,
Yeah,
I'd like to thank you for being on.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and I'd recommend everyone visit my website at happierabroad.com, happierabroad.com, and you'll find a lot of groundbreaking information and taboo truths that you can't find anywhere else. And we have a great community, a forum of advisors that give a lot of advice on how to find happiness, you know, overseas or whatever you want to do. Just a lot of intellectual topics and posters, you know, that are very truthful, complete free thinkers, you know. Happierabroad.com.
That's all we have for tonight, so take care, and we'll be back with you next time.